Welcome, everybody, to another live podcast called This Week in Drones, Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm joined here by the lovely Michelle Duquette and her great longtime friend, special guest, Lorne Cass. And we'll get into some of the background and some of what Lorne brings to the table. But he's part of, along with Michelle, those who have helped build the aviation industry as we know it, and all the collaboration that went into sharing and being operational in the national airspace system that we see today, with commercial airliners all working together and flying safely for so many decades. So they're going to share a little bit about the history of what it took and what led up to the great collaboration we see there. And again, I'll let Michelle actually kind of tee it up a little bit more, but we're going to see how we can learn lessons together that we can then apply to a lot of what we talk about here as a community on this channel, regarding how do we integrate drones into the national airspace as we're, using them for 911 dispatch or for delivering organs and blood and essential, delivery systems. And then also counter UAS. What do we do about the drones that are flying at an airport in the flight path of a commercial airliner, and how do we deconflict those things? So anyway, it's all going to tie together, and we're going to get into some really fun stories in the history of things and how they started. So with that, I'm David Lewin, your host, and I also am regional sales manager with Echodyne Radars. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Michelle. Actually, before I do, guys, we're live. Please send in questions, comments, thoughts for Michelle, for Lorne, as we go through this. Let's dialogue. Let's make this a two-way conversation. And with that, Michelle, go for it.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. I am Michelle Duquette, and my new company is 3 MAD, Michelle and Duquette Air. I am now a private consultant, still serving the enterprise industry. So for those of you who have not engaged with me, I have an enterprise kind of wiring to have operationalizing meaningful connections, ensuring that we don't find ourselves in a tactical situation where we've got a lot of awesome solutions that don't talk to one another. So interoperability at the enterprise level is definitely paramount for where we are today and where we need to go tomorrow.
Well, yeah, I will say, Michelle, I forgot to mention it, but 3 MAD Air is the official sponsor of today's podcast. And so you can see it down there, the logo and the website. So definitely go check it out and connect with Michelle. So
yeah, awesome. just for a note, someone has already called me, you're not a typical consultant, are you? I think, Lorne, you probably know that's been applied to me throughout my entire career. I'm never typical anything. So once again, I'm showing up in that same light. No, I am not. I don't have like annual contracts. I don't have, real deep into technical solutioneering. If you only need some counsel for a month, that's what we do. If it just needs to be a couple of conversations, that's what we do. It's whatever your need is, I'll meet you there and we'll figure it out going forward.
And I mean, for example, you've been making a lot of connections in the drone as a service frontier, right? I mean, I've seen you have so many conversations, connecting the dots, working with DOTs, working with manufacturers of drone in the box solutions that are looking for how in the world do we deploy drone as a service across multiple agencies in the same area, the same city or county, work out the contracts, work out, who's invested, who the stakeholders are, who could benefit. So as an example, very complicated scenario, and you help to simplify it, make connections between people.
Yeah, because ultimately everything is connected. Everything touches. So you can zero in on that drone as a service for that specific service, and that's cool. However, that singular service is going to touch many things in that ecosystem that it operates within. And then that ecosystem touches many more. In our legacy world, we call that the ripple effect. We know that if something happens in DC, it's likely that there's going to be some ramifications for that over in San Francisco. That's just how our industry works. And it's the same thing with the drone industry, or the advanced air mobility industry, where anything new that we're introducing into the national airspace system will have some touch point with many, many legacy systems already there, that it's important that we address. And the same thing with security, right? We've got a whole lot of activities looking to expand beyond 12 nautical miles, outside of our physical border of the United States. We want to be able to fly drones beyond that. We call that high seas. There are no laws for that. We have some very, very strong folks working on that problem space. We also have other folks working on how do we get policy for sending drones back and forth across the borders. All of that stuff also needs to have a security layer, because we are in a time where there is a very real discussion about the Golden Dome. So all of these things do need to be connected, and that's where I come in. Is you focus on you. You focus on what your strength is, what your service is, what your product is, and I will work in the periphery with you to help make sure you're connected to all the right things. That's it in a nutshell.
That was great, Michelle. I love it. Hey, real quick, I'm going to bring up our good friend DJ Smith. How you doing, DJ?
Very good. How's everybody doing?
Excellent.
Good to see you.
I wanted to bring you up since you let me know you had just a small window. Do you have like a certain amount of time here? 5-10 minutes or 15 minutes, or do you have like a certain window that we can work with?
Yeah, I've got a good probably 15 minutes easily. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So what I'd like to do is allow Michelle to intro Lauren, because we were just getting through the 3 introductions here, and he's going to end up telling a story probably maybe after DJ needs to drop off, but he's going to tell us a story of how so much of the collaboration in the national airspace started. He was telling us the other day it started over an argument over a bar napkin here actually in Virginia, between dispatchers and controllers, and they all had their perspective on safety and who they were representing in the equation, and they were going head to head. And he remembers those early days. I think he said it was like 93. And that, he's going to tell us a timeline from there till now and how they were able to put their heads together. And so anyway, you guys don't want to miss it. If you're just tuning in, that's where we're heading. And meanwhile, I guess, Michelle, if you don't mind teeing it up, Lauren, I'll let you say a few words, and then I'm going to highlight something that, DJ Smith brings to the table that was, partly why we wanted to just invite him to this call, because he fits in this picture nicely. But
Absolutely.
Yeah, Michelle, I'll pass it to you, pass it to Lauren, and then we'll keep going.
Okay, so today's focus, and it's my honor. I am so excited for this discussion because this is kind of my DNA. This is where I come from. So this drives how I think. And that is being able to recognize the opportunities for collaboration, and not just in partnering your 2 companies together to produce something. It's way deeper than that, and it's way bigger than that. And so my dear friend Lauren and I have kind of been kicking this for a lot of years now, and he was one of the original OGs of collaborative decision making. And I think we are now at a time in our industry with drones and advanced air mobility and kind of where we are in the evolution. It's really time to recognize that there are lessons learned from legacy aviation that are very applicable right now, because we're about ready to start recreating the wheel. We're about ready to make the same mistakes that we were making back then, and then we found solutions for. So I wanted to bring Lauren in to kind of lay out how that problem space showed itself, and then what happened in order to get beyond it and build efficiencies into our NAS. So and DJ, we needed you here because there is a massive education piece to this that I really wanted you to be part of.
Thank you.
Lauren, please introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michelle. I am very happy to be here, and I am certainly part of that. I think you called it legacy. Is that like older system?
That's us. Yeah.
Original system, yes. So, and as Michelle says, so my background is all in traditional aviation. I'll call it that. I started my life as a controller. I moved then into the airline industry, mostly working in the airline operations control centers, dispatch, if you will, primarily. And then beyond that, I went back to the FAA for a while, tried to help with some of the next gen projects and so forth. But all through that, I was a firm believer in getting people in a room together and collaboration. And as was mentioned, the FAA and airline industry started this CDM, collaborative decision making initiative, back in the early 90s, with something that was originally called just simply FAA Airline Data Exchange, because there was a lot of data out there, but people didn't see updated data and so forth. So, for example, if an airline filed a flight plan and put in there that it was going to depart at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then there was a maintenance delay, and the airline knew it really wasn't going to depart till 8:30, that information didn't get to the FAA. So when you think about issues of demand versus capacity, accuracy is really important, because without it, in this very basic data like that, your predictability goes down the pipes, and that's not good for anybody. So the kind of reluctantly initially, there were two or three, I'll say, airlines and some individuals that were very, very much involved in getting this thing off the ground. I was not one of those in the very beginning. I came along pretty quickly and said, wow, that might even be a good idea. And so as the story goes, there was finally an agreement to pull together this big meeting that was sponsored in Virginia. And there were a bunch of air traffic controllers in there and a bunch of airline dispatchers and others interested in what is this CDM thing and how can we collaborate. I recall that the meeting that was held at a nice facility in Virginia didn't go particularly well, because there was a lot of folded arms at the table, and people were sort of defending their turf as to why they were right and the other person wasn't. But they agreed to meet again. But that night, they ended up in a bar in Virginia and literally drawing pictures, showing each other, this is my problem. This is the problem I have. You don't understand that. And actually getting to sort of a list of things to say, well, maybe there are some things here. And so kind of through CDM, growth from that point was getting people in a room, letting them throw things at the wall, coming up with lists of things that each thought was important, but maybe then deciding, if you put a list of 10 things on the wall, here's 2 things we agree on, let's go after those 2 things. And that sort of led one thing to another, and it involved getting a lot more data exchange back and forth between the FAA and the airlines. It improved predictability. It obviously improved efficiency of the system. Let's make the best use of the available capacity we have by sharing some of this. I can promise you, and I know you're going to hear the same things, many of you, when I first went to my bosses and said, hey, we've got this great new thing we're going to do to improve our operation. It's called collaborative decision making, and we're going to be sharing some data with the FAA, and other airlines will be able to see it too, so we can all work better. The response from my bosses and from others is, what? You want me to shed our data with another airline? That ain't going to happen. So it took some work to get them also to fully realize the value of this. And the partnership, the people are the first thing, to get them in a room together. The collaboration generally leads to some consensus, which leads to new process and procedures that we can use to make this a better place to operate. And this applies now as this whole national airspace system is evolving. It seems to me that it's really critical that we get in the room. I know everybody's worried about their intellectual property and so forth, but we're talking about the operational environment. And whatever toy you build that you're going to sell, you can build a better toy. But if you understand how to operate in the environment better, it's going to make it better for everybody. So thank you for inviting me along here today, Michelle and David. I appreciate it very much. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. That was brilliant. Well, I want to segue that into some thoughts from DJ Smith here in a second. Meanwhile, folks, we are live. What I'd love to hear in the comments to get started as we're dialoguing here as a panel, I'd love to hear a quick couple sentences from each of you out there as to what your experience has been in aviation. Were you part of the original, working together, the CDM, collaborative decision-making process? Did you see that from the 90s till now? Were you one of those folks? Were you a dispatcher, a controller, or you know, are you more involved in the future aviation, the integrating drones into the national airspace, eVTOLs, or maybe a third category is more the security aspects of it, the counter UAS, or detecting drones or detecting other aircraft and deconflicting that low altitude airspace. So I'm curious, folks out there, if you just want to drop a little note about like what sort of a brief history of where you come from, that'd be awesome. And then meanwhile, Michelle, DJ Smith came up in our conversation, you and I and Lauren, as we were prepping this call, because we were talking about, well, we don't want to just say, hey, there was something great happened in the history, back in history that we should apply today and leave it at that. Like, my question to you guys was, where are we seeing this happen today? Where are we already seeing folks applying the actual mentality, the heart, the principles of CDM, of collaborative decision making, already today for new aviation? So DJ Smith was one that popped up right away, and so I just wanted you to say a few words and pass it to him for some thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want, and DJ, I haven't actually said this to you, but it's what I think. I think that you are a natural collaborator. You are organically of that mindset.
Thank
When you
you.
have a problem, you look to bring other inputs in to your thought process, and that diversity of thought is the essence of CDM. It brings everyone's talents to the table so that you can have a realistic chance at solving whatever that problem is, because the problem is not just touching you, it touches all of these other people and then some. So I know that you are you're a big advocate for education. We can't deploy drones at scale until we've ensured that we are talking with the community, that we're talking with the other public safety agencies and offices and departments, that we're talking to the manufacturers so they really understand what it is that we have to have and how it has to work, what those performance envelopes need to be. And then there is a national security aspect of all of this, and there's a counter UAS element just underneath that. All of these things require all of those different voices at the table, because everybody has a different decision they need to make
Mhm.
that contributes. If it's just you and I that are able to do something and David and Lauren can't, then we don't have the solution yet. So I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to talk about your your principles of education when it comes to counter UAS and when it comes to public safety, what you've seen happen within drone responders, and how that has kind of evolved into working groups that are regional in nature, and then your own activities, because dude, you're all over the place spreading the word, and I think that is an excellent example for all of us to be following. So I'll kick it over to you.
So you're always so very kind to me. So yeah, education's been the foundational piece, I think, of any counter UAS efforts that we need to undertake. But not only just for the counter, but also for the drone flight. Until we can come up with a foundational educational level where everybody knows the same things: what drones are, what they're not, when you should fly, when you shouldn't. Because this technology proliferated so quickly that we didn't have a chance to put that education piece in place ahead of the point of sale. So now we're trying to go back and unring a bell that's dang near impossible to unring. So we just have to right now kind of do the best we can do to try to knock down this mound of technology and understanding of the common understanding of the technology, so that our sworn folks on the ground understand what a drone is, what it's not, how they operate, what the dangers are surrounding them, what the national security implications are. But more importantly, we got to get the public involved as well. We need to have a national campaign, or some kind of a robust national campaign to actually educate the general public on what drones are, what they're not, what it means to fly safely and legally in the national airspace. Because you can buy a drone, as we all know on this call, you can charge up the batteries, put it in the air. You have no idea that you're breaking any laws. That it has to be registered. You have to have some sort of a license, whether it's 107 or trust. And that's been the inhibiting thing of all things we want to do for advanced air mobility as well, because it creates deconfliction issues in the airspace where we just have no idea what's in the airspace. When you look at the national security level of it, we dealt with New Jersey and Virginia and Florida and South Carolina and California and all the states that we dealt with on these drone incursions around sensitive critical infrastructure, the problem we had is that we can't get a common operating picture. And I think DHS is using a different term now, and I don't remember what that is off the top of my head, but we can't see everything aloft. And then when you look deeper into that, and this is a multi-layered issue that the education piece helps to solve, which is the legislative piece. The legislative piece hinders our ability to actually get that granularity into the airspace and see everything aloft. We have the ability at the SLTT and critical infrastructure. I say critical infrastructure in the same sentence every time now because they're limited by the same things that we are. They can only do passive detection. Well, passive detection is great to a point where if I have an airoscope, which are now no longer being manufactured, I can see all the DJI products in the air. They're roughly 80% of the world market, so you're kind of hedging your bets that you're going to see majority of everything that's above your airspace. The problem is the criminals and the nefarious and terroristic use of drones are not using common drones anymore. Incursions into correctional facilities are not using DJI drones anymore. So they're using down in Georgia. I was up at Senate Judicial with some folks from ACA. They were talking about what they were dealing with in Georgia, and they're not dealing with DJIs anymore. So now they have a system, D-drone trailers and some other technologies out there that if it doesn't know what to sniff for, to say it kind of crudely, and I apologize, it doesn't know what to look for, sniff for, it's not going to see it. So then there's this caveat of, well, the technology just doesn't work. Well, no, the technology does exactly what it's designed to do. We just don't have the carve out to throw the switch to decode all signals. And so back to the education piece. And Michelle, you and I have talked, Dave, you and I have talked. Every conversation we ever have surrounding this issue always circles back to an education piece of some kind. Foundationally, the hobbyists and the general users and the public, they need to be educated better on what they're supposed to do. Our sworn folks are the next layer. But one thing I like to call education by outreach, we've got to do better at education by outreach with our legislators. So we have to reach out to them and educate them on what drones are and what they're not. Because there's so many misnomers about what a drone does and can do, and how it flies and how it doesn't fly, how it transmits and how it doesn't transmit, that we've got to coalesce those conversations into one fine point where they actually get it all: airspace security, national security, what public safety needs. Which is, Dave, on the one podcast I just kind of went over and over about why we need to reach out to our legislators to get them to understand. Go talk to your SLTT public safety back in your own state. If you hear their pain points and what their necessary needs are, you're going to get better legislation that way. I get it. We're listening to our federal partners in DC and we're listening to industry, but the people who are on the ground every day, and I mean every day now, dealing with drone issues, are going to tell you what the pain points are, where the weaknesses are, and where we need to fix certain areas within that with legislation. There have been some very good bills that have came out. Some of them had problematic pieces to it. Aerospace is one of them. Trying to regulate aerospace is problematic because the FAA, that's their domain. So how do we start to fold those ideas into a piece of legislation that makes sense? How do we regulate airspace in the SLTT community? How at the Virginia State Police level can we actually regulate or have teeth to deal with those nefarious pilots? It comes through education, and that education is through outreach to your legislators, whether it's state level or federal level. So I'll kind of wrap a bow on this whole education piece, and then I'll just pause. But so community level engagement, we've got to engage with the community, show them what safe and legal flight in the national airspace is. The next layer is going to be public safety. We've got to get them to understand what they can and can't do and what's required from a pilot to give you upon interaction with them. Ma'am, sir, you're flying here, you're flying over, the shipyard here in Newport News, and it's illegal to fly here. Do you have your trust license, or do you have your Part 107? Those type of things. So we also don't create liability for our agencies as well by taking action that violates any kind of hobbyist, rights and rules and laws in that capacity as well. So once we can kind of level that playing field, the last thing I'll say is we've got to come to a point where there's a date. We've got to put a date on the calendar. I call it day one. It's kind of corny. Yes, I know. But we come to the point where we put a day one date on the calendar 18 months from now, where we've had a strong, robust conversation about this in education, where everybody should know the rules of the road at that point. And then we move forward. And we say, look, as of this date, if you're not flying within the rules and regulations slated for drones, then you're going to either be mitigated, you're either going to be possibly prosecuted, or face a civil fine of some kind, or we're going to seize your drone if you're doing something criminal use with it. Until we get to that point, advanced air mobility is still going to keep spinning its wheels because we can't clarify airspace. We can't deconflict airspace and things in the airspace for them to do longer and farther DFR flights, longer and further delivery flights. And then as we start to get that snapshot together, the other piece is really important. I think is Congress.
Hey
is
DJ,
gonna
are
have
you able to
stuck-
hold your phone a little closer to you because it's you're fading in and out pretty. It's pretty hard to hear you.
I'm sorry, let me move towards the window. Yeah, so we get Congress to actually put money where their mouth is, start funding some of these projects with the caveat that they get access to the data, so that we start creating that common operating national security picture as well of all the airspace across the country. And then if we can accomplish all those things, and it's not a heavy lift, people seem to think it's some kind of this major heavy lift, but you've got enough of the SLTT communities and at the state levels that are willing to put up and actually help with this project. So I'll pause there and then see where you want to go from there.
I want to ask you one question, DJ. What you just said about Congress needs to do X, and then as the reciprocal, they get access to some of the data. Can you
All right,
specify what it was?
So if these systems are pretty costly and very expensive. So what we're seeing now is like in Florida right now is working on a multi-jurisdictional project to actually do a shared data project where they share the cost of the equipment and share the data. So if we can get Congress to step up, just like they did in 1956, I believe, with the National Highway System, we built the National Highway System to address a couple pain points. One was mass proliferation of automobiles in the U.S., congestion, and the other was safety. Well, now we've kind of flipped that cake upside down to use an FAA term, and now we're looking at the airspace now, the mass proliferation of unmanned aerial systems in the airspace. So we're concerned with congestion. We're also concerned with safety issues. So for them, the benefit for them is this: they help us fund these projects and start clarifying certain pieces of airspace. And over time, as we build this network out, the caveat is they get access to that data. So in a national security implication time where, like we did in December with New Jersey and Virginia and these other states, we have clarity into the airspace. So we now can see things longer and farther out. That's the goal for all of us. And then the financial benefit to Congress is that data also becomes part of that common operating picture for advanced air mobility. If you can use it for national security, the same things we need for national security to get eyes in the airspace to see what's there is going to benefit advanced air mobility and deconfliction and UTM and all these terms we've been using for the last couple of years that have just not been able to bear many fruits because we can't get over that hump of clarifying the airspace.
Got it. Thank you.
And I think that's huge, DJ, that you bring the primary focus on counter UAS, right? To this, if there was two halves to it. I mean, but then you bring it, I mean, from that perspective to the conversation, but it turns out we actually have to be able to clarify who's supposed to be and who's not supposed to be in the airspace, just like you said, so that then we're able to fly much further and kind of more freely now that the rules are actually set and people know what the rules are, so I found that to be like an insight, a really insightful piece, because that came up in our conversation yesterday too. What about the drone detection kind of counter side of things, the security aspect to this? And so again, that's where you came to mind, and so we really appreciate it. You are a real world modern day example of collaborative decision making in action, and we really wanted to highlight you and thank you for what you're doing. And I guess Michelle or Lauren, do you have any other questions or thoughts for DJ? Otherwise, he's like in and out of speaking at a conference right now and on all of his good stuff, and he was very, very gracious to jump on here with us for a few minutes.
Well, I think that that's my mom. I think that DJ, I hope you circle back to this video a little bit later when you have a moment, because
Yes,
I think that there were so many ties to what you said to how CDM evolved over time. So
I would
you
definitely do
talked
it.
about, I mean, it was no kidding. It was a grassroots effort, just like you're talking about. You need boots on the ground in order to inform what those policies need to look like, because they're the folks that are doing it. And that's exactly what CDM was. So please circle back and check the video out and say hi to Johnny Walker. He's on watching us right now.
Yes, he is.
Absolutely. Well, I'm gracious to be here. Lauren, great to meet you, sir. I certainly appreciate you having me on the show today. I really do appreciate it. I'm in sunny Phoenix, Arizona at the Axon Week, and these people out here have been very, very great to me and very gracious. But anything I can do to always add to the conversation or help the heavy lift, please just holler. That's all I ask.
Absolutely, and vice versa. Seriously.
Absolutely.
I'll see you
Thank
guys.
DJ.
Have a good
Take
one.
care.
Thanks, DJ.
So
Awesome. Well, do you want to let me highlight a couple comments just to, or that is, thanks folks for sending your notes in here, Stephen. Your drone pilot doing wind turbine inspections. That's really cool, and we'll have to chat. So thanks for sharing that. And like I said earlier, if you guys are out there listening and you want to type in a sentence or a paragraph or whatever describing your role in aviation and your history in aviation, that'd be great, so we have a little more context as to the back and forth here. And really quick, John Walker also mentioned, I may not read this word for word, but just back in 1985 he was part of the FAA Eastern Region Air Traffic Division, and then he led all sorts of initiatives, all the way down to saying, hey, you're spot on, Lauren, in this last sentence here. It was not until CDM was woven into daily planning with users in the loop that they were able to start to really see things start to come together and smooth out with some of the problems they were experiencing. So thanks, guys, for commenting in. Richard Reynolds as well. Hey there, how you doing? And so anyone else that would like to send in a note or ask a question of Lauren and Michelle, feel free. And so Michelle, Lauren, back to you guys. I'd love to just actually, take a few minutes and deep dive a little bit into that history that was alluded to earlier. But any thoughts, Michelle? Just kind of segue off of DJ's.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts. You know me. But before I do, Lauren, did it ring bells for you listening to DJ describe the problems of today?
Very much so. I mean, a lot of people with a lot of different issues and a lot of different discussions taking place, but not connected. So trying to pull those together and connect them together, I think, is what CDM is all about. And, I know John Walker from way back, and he has been at the forefront of trying to figure out a better way to manage the flows make better use of the airspace we have. And flow management is relatively new, if you think of 30, 40 years being relatively new. Mm-hmm. But the idea was, let's try to make the best use of this. The demand versus capacity issue is always going to be there. And as we were talking yesterday, I mentioned that I attended a meeting one time with an FAA regional administrator, a colleague of Mr. Walker's, when a brand new airport in Dallas opened up. It was a big airport. I can't remember the name of it, but some big airport in between Dallas and Fort Worth. And there were a bunch of controllers invited and airline representatives and so forth. And there was discussion about how to make the best use of this new facility and all this new airspace. And it was back and forth about the shortcomings of the FAA, and it couldn't handle this and so forth. And the regional administrator simply asked, okay, let me just ask all of you airline folks out here, why is it if I look at the schedule that's starting next week, at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, there are 22 departures scheduled? Don't you guys ever talk to each other? That was actually a very good question. And the fact was, the airlines themselves cannot talk about schedules. They can, however, in the real time and real operation, provide updates to what they're planning to do. Like I said, if they have a departure that's going to leave 30 minutes later than they had originally planned and filed for, using what eventually became the CDM processes, they can certainly make better use. The airspace can be much more efficient. You're not going to ever have 20 airplanes taking off at the same time, which was his point. But I mean, getting people in the same room and talking about the same things, even if they initially have a very different perspective on it, is key.
So I'll offer that we've started to do a little bit of that in pockets, right, for this community. So hopefully there are some folks that are listening to us right now that are saying, yeah, we do partner. We are collaborating. We just had the first Dallas Key site where we had service suppliers and OEMs together operating. So we've got that already. Okay, yes, you have that. There is so much more that can be done. So what lessons that we can learn from just kind of taking a look back and looking at the progression of how CDM, collaborative decision making as a program. It started as a grassroots effort. So Lauren's not kidding and Johnny's not kidding when we say that we really were in a bar. I was not there. I came in a little bit later, but that's where a lot of our grassroots, no kidding, realistic discussions happen. The kinds of discussions that DJ was just referring to that need to happen when he talks about make sure you're going into your own communities and asking your people who are doing the jobs, what is it that they need? And also soliciting their ideas for how to go about getting after that need. And what ended up happening in CDM is those aircraft dispatchers and those traffic management folks were the ones boots on the ground that were dealing with the ridiculous delays, that were dealing with demand that was exceeding capacity, that would then ripple back throughout the entire day. And there was no way to kind of recover from any of that. We don't have that particular problem in this industry, but we are thinking about UTM in a way to be able to manage volumes of drone traffic in the same regions. So we're going to get there. There will at one point be that day. There now exists an entire network that is the CDM net, and it was specifically designed by those boots on the ground folks who were the ones dealing with the problems every single day and were creative in how they came to, I don't know, let's try this, guys. Well, that's never going to work because I have this responsibility over here. Okay, nobody knew that before. Now that we know that, we can flex. So maybe I don't do it this way, maybe I'll do it that way. Is that better for you? Yeah, that's better. Okay, let's try that tomorrow. And that's how we got it to work. We have that opportunity now because all of you out there have the ability to be talking to your peers. Yes, they're perhaps competitors, but there is a bigger efficiency value to be gained when you start to share certain pieces of intelligence with one another. I'm not saying you got to give up the baby, right? You don't have to put your IP out there and say, I solved world peace and here it is. But there is a level of intent that is intelligence that is meaningful for these other operators in that shared space. And it's different for drones. It's different for this community. So we really do have to sit down and have these frank discussions about what that means for us. The drone safety team is doing that to some degree. They're talking about what is the safety data for this community and how is it meaningful and how are we going to use it and what are those data sets and what is SMS within the context of the drone community. We absolutely need all that. That's just one piece. There's so much more.
Big time. Actually, Michelle, I just had to shout out. Let's see if I can do this while we're live on here. But I want to remind us of your wonderful napkin sketch. You see that? There it is. That's modern day, folks. What it looks like on a napkin sketch when Michelle, I think it was actually at a bar in was it in Virginia?
It was not at a bar.
No.
It was at Charles's Drone Responders Conference.
I'm just kidding. No, it was at a hotel, I think. After the fact, I remember seeing sitting around a table, collaborating on that. So anyway, it does still happen today. Good job there. Speaking of Charles, we've actually got him on the line here. Charles, if you can hear me, hope you're doing well there, sir. Thanks for calling in. I'll let you see if you can unmute and say hi real quick, and we'll. Oh, there you go. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Michelle, it's always great to see you. And yes, Michelle is noted for her her illustrations and bringing concepts to actual visual understanding, which is remarkable.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Charles.
So, Charles, we wanted to bring you as well. As a quick summary of our conversation up to this point, we've been talking about the history of collaborative decision making throughout the last couple of decades, and how the airline industry, amongst dispatchers and controllers and airlines, had to come together in the same room, hash things out, and actually coordinate to be able to effectively, efficiently, safely utilize the national airspace together. Even though they were competitors, but there's a lot of people that wanted to, obviously fly out of whatever airport and do it efficiently and coordinate together, but there was a lack of coordination. And so Michelle and Lauren and I have been talking about this, like, what's the history? How did you guys solve these challenges? And it was like the answer was, it was through collaboration, through bringing stakeholders together in a meaningful way to put everything out on the table and pick the 2 or 3 things out of the 10 items that come up. What are the 2 things we can all agree on and actually progress and get and move forward? So I wanted to invite you to speak on this call, because I was asking Michelle and Lauren, who do you see today that's actually applying the principles of CDM, of collaborative decision making, that you guys saw in kind of just the classic aviation world? Who do you see doing that today in the advanced air mobility or drone DFR space? And you came up, they're like, man, Charles Werner and the drone responders, and the whole working group that you've pulled together, where you've invited not only manufacturers and end users, law enforcement agencies, but also the FAA themselves, to sit in on those meetings and actually collaborate together and push through hurdles and streamline the process. So with that said, I don't know, Michelle, do you have any other thoughts? But I ultimately just love to hear some thoughts, Charles, if that all makes sense in that context. I'd love to just highlight basically what you're doing, and then the successes that you've seen even lately of making progress there. But Michelle, any quick comments to help tee it up a little bit?
Sure. Charles, I apologize. I didn't prepare you for this. What I'm trying to do is bring to light a legacy process that was started grassroots with the airlines and FAA traffic managers, and it evolved into a formal program. So it's a program, it's a process, it's a network, it's a way of thinking. And I wanted to highlight what you have been doing with drone responders as an organic um, kind of duplication of that process without knowing the principles of that process. So things that you've done with the working groups, um, uh, both the Texas and Florida groups, and just how you approach problem solving writ large. So our audience here is mostly are mostly drone and advanced air mobility security or service suppliers or manufacturers or tech folks or policy, but perhaps not many are legacy aviation. I wanted to make that connection, and you are one of the best examples um, to come up and just talk about the importance of that collaboration.
Yeah, I heard a little of the tail end of what you were saying at the first part, and I was thinking just in that part that I heard of how similar the situations and the conversations are. Even still today, the commercial airlines probably still have the largest influence on the FAA, just because of they're flying people, they're flying lots of volume, and they want to make sure that the airspace stays safe. So naturally, there's a resistance to allowing drones in the airspace, and there's some good reasons for that. We've seen where a drone took a super tanker out during a wildfire by a drone enthusiast, a recreational flyer. So there are some concerns, and what we're trying to do now is to figure out how do we integrate public safety drones into this airspace in a way that it is safe, and that we are addressing those issues while at the same time doing some really great missions of saving lives. And as I'm sure, going back through all those decades that you were referencing, the frustrations with the FAA were probably the same, if not more, because now you're trying to fly with people. But one of the things that we're trying to emulate is we need to make sure that we instill an aviation safety culture into this drone environment, to which people are applying drones in public safety emergencies. And a lot of them are a little resistant, thinking, look, we deal with risks every day. We should be able to fly without a parachute. We should be able to fly without any collision lights. But what comes first is safety in the national airspace before we do anything else. And what I've repeatedly said is it's not okay for us to kill one to save one. That's not how it works. And I give the example, we as emergency responders can drive faster than the speed limit. We can go through traffic lights. We can sometimes go in the opposite lane of traffic. But we have to be displaying our lights and sirens, and we can only do those things when it's safe to do so. So while we have the ability to do it, we can't just do it without any regard for the safety of the others we serve. So now, and to your point, the whole thing of us moving forward has got to be a combination of all the different factions. It means public safety, it means industry, it means academia, it means all the players. The carriers, the airline carriers are going to be important discussions. The helicopters, the vertical helicopters and all those kind of things that come with it have to be a part of this conversation so that we can provide that assurance. And I will tell you that one of the interesting things that happened this week is we're talking to Orange County, California Fire Department, and we said, look, we've got this collision avoidance system that Seconia from Israel has developed, and it gives vehicle-to-vehicle communications a way of cooperatives of preventing collisions with each other, whether it's manned aircraft or it's unmanned aircraft, so that you can actually avoid collisions. And as Mark Bathrick would say, he's more concerned about the collision and scraping paint of two helicopters more so than the drone. So having said that, I'll stop and just say the collaboration is the key. And if we don't do it, we're not going to be successful.
Right.
Lauren, actually, I saw you nodding once or twice while Charles was sharing. Did you have any, kind of tie-ins to what he's seeing, to what you've seen in the history?
Yeah, no, I think, the point is we're at that point. And I think it's exactly what Charles said, but we do have to get down. We have to identify who's doing what. We have to make sure that and I do believe this period of time is for evolution, not necessarily revolution, because sometimes when we put a date in the sand that something big is going to happen and it doesn't happen, we sort of get lost then after that. And I don't mean this in a critical way, but when the FAA identified next gen, and I put that in quotes, as this great new thing that's going to happen, and there was a date put on it for part of that program, which was 2020, then there was this thought that in 2020, all of a sudden we were going to have this whole new next gen system that was going to make everything better. So I think we got to consider that the airspace right now is in need of transition to accept new entrants, from drones through AAM and so forth, along with the traditional operators. And I think getting in the room together with everybody, and first of all, starting off with I'll say in this case, the drone community and the new entrant community, and then getting that combined with the airlines. And there is some of that work taking, and I shouldn't say airlines, with traditional aviation, because obviously general aviation and business aviation are a huge part, and they all have their own take on how things could go. And a quick side story, going way back to the early part of CDM, after we've been underway for a couple of years, the airlines were involved, but at that time, business aviation was not interested. So we sort of forced a meeting with the business aviation community, NBAA specifically, and the first meeting was not pretty. It was not at all, as a matter of fact. And myself and a gentleman from NBAA were assigned to go off and have it out and get past this thing. We're not doing this anymore. And we got in a room and we figured out a whole bunch of things we disagreed on. But again, going back to the early discussion, we found one or two things we thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we went after those. And NBAA, business aviation, and others became fully engaged in the CDM process. So getting everybody in the room is the tough part of it. And I understand where Charles is going here, but I do see a lot of similarities.
Charles, do you have any advice on or even examples of how you've been able to pull this off and why you've been able to get all these stakeholders in the same room? Because it is working. We're not just saying, guys, we need this and dropping it there. We're saying we need this, and there are folks actually doing it, and you're a huge highlight of that. So just advice or examples of how it's working would be great for listeners out there.
I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Highly Effective Leaders. And I think the first thing is listen first to hear what the other concerns are and understand that before you start pitching something, because if you automatically start off on the wrong foot, the conversation gets really hard. And I think what we found with the FAA that was really important was to understand what were their responsibilities and their needs, and what did they have to have from us to develop the trust of being able to say yes. Because in the beginning, if you remember, it was no to about everything. And that was because there at the same time, there was no statistics. Nobody knew what these drones were going to look like, what they were going to do, or how they were going to impact the airspace. So in enlisting first, it helped me really understand what were the points that I needed to address to get them to trust what we wanted to do. I mean, we as public safety, we're risk takers. It's a necessity of our jobs. But in this case, we also had to learn and understand the national airspace, that we have a responsibility that as soon as we take on that remote pilot, we are a pilot in the national airspace, no different than any other pilot that's out there, general aviation or otherwise. And we're still struggling with that. So that was part of the FAA still kind of saying no. But after the statistics came in, then there was an understanding of what we're doing. And I never will forget, I was at the IPP collective group, and we were trying to get the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver down so we could fly 1,500 feet around and over a building during really hostile situations. And we got the airspace. We're like, okay, the airspace is okay. You're going to fly shielded. You're going to be within 50 feet of the highest obstacle, not a problem. But we still have to deal with the airspace. We have to deal with the ground risk. And that's when I was able to speak, because Joe Moore asked the question. I said, Joe, you don't have to in these situations. We own the perimeter. We control that perimeter, so it's ours. And he said, well, you just answered my question. So that was the understanding of really coming to that point of where we could get to the same place at the same time. And that's what the whole thing has been about. And it's been getting everybody else on the same wavelength, everybody in the same direction, and realizing that we've got to do certain things. Like police want to do covert missions, and they don't want to have any collision lights on sometimes. We finally convinced most of them you can't see the anti-collision lights from the ground. When you're flying, it's shooting up into the air, and it's making sure that general aviation knows that there's something in the sky that can kill them. And John Mee has been really one that focused on that, saying we need to make sure that we've got the visibility, because drones can blend into the sky. They're often mistaken for birds and vice versa. So the more we do to distinguish those things, the more we create a comfort level of what's being done by whom, and it's safe. And the other thing that we're seeing is that really training the same way as general aviation, the same terminology, the same words. We see this a lot in the wildfire settings. They're really working hard on this, and the helicopter pilots and those people flying, when you start talking something different, not familiar to them, they realize you're not an aviator, and that immediately sets this concern that I've got somebody who doesn't understand the airspace. So it's been collaborative. It's been really listening, learning, and then start having conversations.
So I think that in a nutshell, we have organic pockets of successful collaboration happening across this community, whether it's with public safety or the key site or other areas. And what I'm trying to advocate for here is that we need to have that common situational awareness that Lauren was referring to back in the beginning, where everybody knows what everybody else has to do, and you're working together to figure out how to make it all happen under um, unpredictable circumstances without losing the predictability that everyone needs in order to execute their mission. You can have dynamics and randomness and still have a level of predictability.
Mhm.
And that is where your situational awareness becomes so important, and how you define it. So taxonomy is going to be a big deal. CDM has a very specific taxonomy that they created over time, and they created network package messaging that is aligned with that taxonomy. We're doing the same thing here. We've got standards that have taxonomies. We've got working groups that have taxonomies. We've got different industry stakeholders that have taxonomies. And when they don't all match, that's a problem. So what I'm trying to advocate for here is, let's learn from what happened before. We're doing it in pockets now. But I think maybe, Lauren, maybe some tangibles on um, ground delay programs, AFPs, playbooks, maybe some examples might be
Well,
helpful here.
just a high level example. So let's say we have some sort of flow restriction, whether it's going to an airport in the form of a ground delay program where the FAA has said, hey, demand is exceeding capacity in this period of time, so we're only going to allow 50 airplanes an hour to land instead of 60. So there are slots assigned. And in the way this world is identified in the CDM today, so let's say that the number 3 slot was assigned just coincidentally to United Airlines flight. But United sends a message in through the CDM system saying that flight is not going to arrive when we thought. It's going to be later by 30 minutes, and they're going to that slot is released then. And another operator can say, "Oh, I can make that slot work and use it," and they get that slot. And keep in mind, the airline, Acme Airlines, that takes that slot doesn't know that it was United Airlines that gave up the slot. All they know is there's a slot available that wasn't available before, and that process has worked pretty darn well. So the data that's been exchanged CDM, the one good thing about it is you understand what's going on in the system. What's the demand out there? Where is the demand? What hours are the demand in this particular, if there's some sort of traffic flow management program, but it's de-identified. So I don't know I just know there's demand out there and when it's going to be there, but I don't know that it happens to be November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or American 647. It's just a slot in that airspace. So it's that situational awareness that really improves predictability, which improves the efficiency, which ultimately, bottom line for everybody, makes it a safer system.
I'd like to point out that United, the ones who gave up that slot to begin with because they weren't going to make it in order to keep it, because Acme Airline took that slot and was able to get themselves out on time, all of this is sequential. So had the system stayed static, then Acme Airline would have gotten a significant delay because it was in line waiting for another slot to come up. By taking that slot, it freed up a slot later, which would likely coincide with when United would be ready to go. They would not then have to go to the back of the line. So there is this, it's a mutual benefit that happens. So now let's put all this into context with drone as a service. Take a community, and we've got Amazon and Walmart, and maybe we're doing some water treatment testing and public safety, and you name it. There's probably so many more just in one small area. And I don't know, it's a windy day. And all of those things that are being in the intent to fly, to operate in this area is being pushed a little bit out of whack because the routes are not true. It's taking longer, or you just can't get there right now. You got to wait until that gust goes by, or whatever it is. Having the opportunity to sit down and be able to understand what the big picture is and see where your points of opportunity are going to be presented to you is invaluable. It's way more valuable than waiting and seeing how it comes out, because that's delay. And in aviation, delay is bad. Same with delivery. I mean, customer service, delay is bad.
Yeah, predictability. I think you said that yesterday, Lauren, in our conversation, is one of the key outputs that we look for with a collaborative decision-making process where we share this data. It's predictability. I mean, like you think about it on the highway system, it's not necessarily a delay in, if I have to drive on the highway to get to work every morning and I leave at 7:30 a.m. and I go the same route, just because it takes, even if there's some delay in that route because of traffic, if it's predictable every day at 7:30, it's the same amount of delay, then I can be okay with, I can plan around that predictability. It's not necessarily even about making it perfect for everyone all the time, but it is about measuring things and, making those outputs predictable so people can plan around it. And then maybe we work on making them more efficient. Well, in that example, maybe they need to add another lane to that highway, or add an express lane, or open it up earlier. They may be able to make adjustments then based on that. But still, as a user, a consumer or user of that information, as long as I know what to expect, I'm not as frustrated. I can work around it. So I think that's a point to be taken. We are coming up against the end of the hour. Any final thoughts from you guys on, what we've been talking about, or even just, I guess, since we have so much limited time, if each of you want to take, 30 seconds and just share a little bit about how people can reach you, or, if there's a way to kind of get involved in what you're doing, because I'd love to continue this conversation. So I guess just, like Charles, if you want to go first, and then if you need to drop off, that's totally cool. But if you're still out there, if you can hear me, if you want to jump on and just let people know how to find you, or I'll do that as well. If you, oh, okay, I see you come off. Go for it. If you want to just tell people how to reach you, how they get involved, just in 30 seconds, that'd be great.
Yeah, like with everybody else, you can email me at charles@droneresponders.org. I'm only getting about 20 emails a day now, so things are slowing down. I wish. But I just like to say the best is yet to come.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And then Lauren as well, any kind of thoughts, or how, if you're working on any projects or anything and you want people to reach out to you, you can let them know how, if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. I've retired 2 or 3 times and I can't get that down very well. So I do some consulting here with some, small carriers and with some drone operators, eVTOL, the vertiport world, and so forth, trying to help, and mostly looking at the airspace issues and ATC and TFM and so forth. And I'm always happy to chat with anybody. The easiest way to get me is probably just look me up on LinkedIn and go that direction. But I would just say at the end, I want to repeat again, I believe that this process can apply very well to this new infant world. And it's really about people. It's about getting people in a room together, developing process and procedures, and then education. Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lauren. Michelle, do you want to take us home? And please refer again to 3MAD Air. Let people know about your company, because I'd love them to find you and continue to work with you.
Absolutely. So I think that in a nutshell, I echo Lauren's belief. I absolutely believe that this is all about being able to bring folks together and work within the context of their individual missions, having to operate in the same space. Ultimately, all of us need to get to a level of interoperability. So what CDM brings is an opportunity to bring all of those talents, those different missions, bring them all together and really hash through what it means to make it work in spite of whatever the constraints are, whatever that curveball is that comes in, because you are now in a better understanding of what that person can do and what that person can do and what that person can do. You now have a better feel for what that predictability of the system dynamic will look like, and that enables you to be more efficient. So that is what I do at 3MAD Air, is I'm helping folks as they are focusing on themselves and their product or their service. I am kind of circling around in the periphery to help make sure that they get those right people in the room with them to help them understand how changes or constraints or even new opportunities will touch them, and how they can work with those folks to adapt to a common solution so that there is a common picture out there. Over. And reach me here on LinkedIn, obviously, or Michelle at 3madair.com.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and for bringing the lessons learned from the last generation, if you will, that you guys saw great success by applying these principles, by collaborating, by working together, and not just kind of fighting between competitors, but figuring out at least 1 or 2 areas as competitors where airlines, as an example, could benefit from sharing information with each other. And, we'll continue to figure out ways to apply those today. And please reach out to Michelle, 3madair.com, and also to Lauren. And we'll see you guys next time, Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And appreciate everybody out there for the comments. I wish I could have gotten to all of them today, but we had a couple callers to highlight this time. But either case, we'll talk to you guys later. We'll see you again on This Week in Drones.
Thank you now.